Senua, the outcast who became a warrior, who faced her demons and challenged the gods for her lover's soul, has accepted the voices, the furies, as part of herself. Just like her mother Galena, she was not like other people. She saw and heard the world differently. Her father Zinbel told her she was evil, tainted by the sin of her mother. Tormented and afraid, she retreated from the world. Until love broke through like the rays of a new dawn. In Dillion's acceptance, she could live again. He gave light to her mind and freed a warrior from her body. But the voice of her father stayed with her, reminding her of her curse. And when the plague came to her land, the people blamed Senua. She took her darkness with her, banishing herself to the wilds. So she was not there when the Northmen massacred her people and sacrificed Dillion to the god of hell. Senua's torment was so deep that the world around her fell away. She took the head of her beloved, the vessel of his soul, and vowed to go to hell herself to save him. Through mist-shrouded horrors, she fought to find the secret path that would lead her to the very gates of hell. But the way was marked by fire and illusion. Senua had to fight the gods that guarded these paths and stave off the rot which threatened to consume her mind and end her life. Only conquest could open the gates. Only blood would bring her face to face with Hela, face to face with defeat. Once again, Senua was engulfed in darkness, lost in a maze of misery and confusion, until Dillion's voice led her to the promise of victory. A sword that could kill a god. To win the sword, Senua would drown in her darkest memories, pulling at the shards lodged in flesh, mind, and soul. She pressed deeper into the underworld, resisting its grasping hands and deafening cries, until she found her prize before the guardian of hell's gates. Senua released her rage, a fury that could not be stopped, not by savage jaws, not by waves of warriors, not by the pull of death itself. In defeat and desperation, Senua begged for her beloved's release. But a sacrifice must be made, and burdens cast away. Senua's fate was never in the hands of the gods, but in her own. Only she could choose, out of love, to live, to go on, and to take us with her.
Senua finds a unique courage to keep pushing forwards on her quest, no matter what. She sees the world differently to those around her and faces challenges others would avoid. When driven so strongly by one powerful purpose, she will do anything to rid the world of the darkness. This is her life's mission, and she will not stop until she fulfills her quest.
My name is Eddie, and I have lived with psychosis for most of my life. To me, psychosis means living in a different reality, a reality that isn't shared with other people. Often living with psychosis is dark and miserable. While experiencing psychosis, I've got to hear the voice of God, the opposite, seen and spoken with angels, and been to hell itself. Recovery college and peer support really did turn my life around. I thought I would never get better, and yet here I am. The things that Senua experiences in Hellblade are very similar to some of my own experiences. She lives in a reality that other people might find hard to understand. She sees significance in symbols, in meeting people, in all sorts of things that are going on around her. Senua is experiencing an altered state of reality which would be very hard to understand without having experienced it yourself or playing Hellblade.
Lost soul who fought through hell to find us.
You were lost. Not anymore.
Are you ready for what you will find here?
It's difficult saying that it's an illness, that it's not real. Of course, to me, it is. And of course, to Senua, it is. And that's what's driving her to do these amazing feats of courage, to overcome pain and exhaustion, to do what she knows she must.
All the fear.
Everything I've seen, everything I've done, has led me to this place.
We've come so far, not far enough. Say it. You are ready. Tell them.
In Senua'S Saga Hellblade 2, we tell the second part of the story of Senua, a Celtic warrior who, like Eddie, has experiences of psychosis, seeing the world in a unique way and existing in a reality unshared by others. At a surface level, this manifests for Senua in seeing things that others don't, hearing things that others don't, and having unique beliefs about the world.
My name's Paul Fletcher. I'm a psychiatrist and a professor of neuroscience at the University of Cambridge, and I've been working with the Ninja Theory team on Hellblade and other projects for several years now. I am a clinical doctor, but have also added research and teaching to my role. And in all three areas, I'm especially interested in the human brain and how it strives to make sense of the world, which is complex and changing all the time.
The lake, like a mirror. You can see the reflection.
Senua, like many people, experiences psychosis. Now, psychosis is not a diagnosis, although it is associated with a number of medical and psychiatric conditions. But ultimately, it's a loose description of a shift in one's experience of reality.
What are you doing?
Screams of the dead.
There's something here.
They are not.
I need to find out what it is.
They are.
A person with psychosis might experience changes in their perceptions and their beliefs. For example, they might see or hear things that other people can't. and they might come to believe things that are quite uncharacteristic for them. For example, they might feel that somebody, perhaps somebody even very close to them, is intent on trying to harm them. Now, it's very important to remember that this is not just a vague feeling or an imagination. To the person, it feels like their reality, just as everything around me feels like my reality to me. I, like many people, feel that in order to even begin to understand psychosis, we have to start with thinking about how the brain works in general, how it makes sense of the world around it. And when we do that, we're repeatedly confronted with evidence that actually it doesn't just rely on the evidence of our senses, but it actually relies on what it already knows, on its predictions, its anticipations, and its expectations.
Your voices.
Now that might seem like a defect. After all, why would we want to rely on what we already know rather than what the world is telling us? But if we did act simply as passive receivers, we would be completely swamped. We'd be like a newborn infant trying to make sense of the colours and shapes without any way of having a framework to try and understand those colours and shapes. Our senses are bombarded with information from the world that's rapid, it's intensive, it is noisy, ambiguous, unreliable. And if we were to try and make sense of that without imposing patterns and expectations, then it would be like trying to assemble a multi-dimensional jigsaw without knowing what the picture was on the box. Many of us think that the brain ultimately is an organ that makes predictions. It craves patterns and associations in order to make sense of the world. And without that, we are confronted with a feeling of uncertainty, of anxiety, of distress, even of fear.
They're calling. Something is drawing ahead.
Where do these predictions come from? Many of them are actually embedded in the structure of our brain, probably wired there by evolution. Many of them come from our earliest experiences as babies, trying to make sense of this new world that we're born into. Many come from our early childhood experiences, from what we learn from others and how we interact with others, from our parents, our teachers, our friends. We all have a feeling that we're directly in contact with an objective reality, but it's probably the case that what we experience as our constructed model of the world is a blend of the evidence of our senses, but also what we are predicting or expecting from the world. So this blend exists in a very fine and delicate balance, and the weighting of that balance probably varies a great deal across different individuals. But crucially, this balance is what determines how we experience and interpret and act upon the world. And some of them are embedded in shared experiences with others, our society, our culture, our arts, even our religions and our mythologies. So for the most part, this works very well for us and enables us to make sense of the world, but it's also, being a delicate balance, it can be shifted, and it's very easy, even under the most normal day-to-day circumstances, to deviate from objective reality. A good example of this is the hollow mask illusion. All of us are familiar with a mask. We know that it depicts a face and that the inside is hollow. But when we see the mask rotating round and we see the hollow side, there is a deeper prediction, probably embedded in our brain, that facial features tend not to be hollow, that they stick out. And this deeper prediction can override our knowledge that the mask is hollow and make us actually perceive the face as sticking out at us. Despite what we know, the deeper predictions will override this. So for me and many in my field, perceptual illusions like this, which are very common, are really interesting because they tell us something fundamentally about how the brain is making sense of reality using its predictions. But more than that, for me, it's very interesting because it begins to give us a sense of how psychosis might begin to emerge. Psychosis is this experience of an altered internal construction of one's reality. And it seems feasible that this is dependent upon this balance I've talked about between predictions and evidence. And it is probably the case that some people tend to weight their predictions more heavily. This, in many circumstances, is advantageous because it means that they can discern patterns and associations that perhaps other people can't. But if that balance was shifted further by different circumstances, then it may well be that they begin to construct a reality that doesn't accord with the world around them. What might cause that shift? Well, a number of things. It could be caused by stress, sleep deprivation. It could be caused by illness, neurochemical disturbances. It's also the case that our experience will change how we predict things. So a very profound experience, for example, of trauma, could powerfully change the way in which we make predictions about the world and shift us from this delicate balance into a state of psychosis. In the case of Senua, we know that from an early age she was able to discern patterns and associations that perhaps other people couldn't. And on top of that, her childhood and adolescence had a number of traumas in it. Her father was abusive and he accused her of being the cause of evil and darkness. Her mother, who had the same capabilities as she did, was actually sacrificed for the same reason. And in addition, her village was attacked by Vikings and her lover was brutally killed. And it's possible that all of these traumas would act on her natural tendencies to topple her into this psychotic experience that is depicted in Hellblade.
With every defeat, the dark rot will grow and soon it will take her soul.
In Hellblade's Senua'S Sacrifice, we find Senua discovering and understanding her experiences. They're relatively new to her, and the pain and torment feels at its most acute. Having travelled to a new place, with a mind full of her trauma and truth stories of the Vikings, she embarks on a journey of coming to terms with what has happened in her life. Ultimately, rather than finding the unachievable certainty of rescuing Dillion, she achieves certainty in the realisation that Dillion is gone forever. She learns to accept his death, and in turn her experiences of psychosis.
Even in darkness, the wonder and the beauty of this world never leaves us. It is always there, waiting to...
In Senua'S Saga, we find Senua at a different place on her physical and mental journey. Empowered with the sense that she has overcome her own darkness, she's now compelled to follow a new quest, to save her people from that same darkness.
You smell their fear.
He's here. Death is coming.
Look at the bones.
Death is coming for
Look at the
you.
bones. That's going to be you. That's going to be everyone.
In Sacrifice, Senua's psychosis is acute and all-consuming. She is preoccupied and absorbed by her experiences. To some extent, she is enveloped and enslaved by the darkness. She cannot ignore her voices and visions. She's totally committed to the quest within her altered reality. In Saga, there has been some resolution to this. There's no miracle recovery. She still experiences the voices and visions. She still has a changed reality. But the balance of power has shifted. She is the one who is able to be in control. She's able to resist and challenge the voices. She's able to make decisions that much more clearly reflect her own goals.
They see through your lies, and I will show them how to see as I do. I will not appease your gods. I will destroy them.
And in addition, in Saga, she is able to encompass the reality of others. She sees them for the constructions that they are, and she is able to interact with them, and I think that's a very powerful change and a very important area to explore.
They have lost everything.
In Saga, we've had the opportunity to explore the next phase of Senua''s mental health journey. One where she's come to a place of understanding, but where she and us as creators have new challenges to overcome. Where Senua''s belief system will clash with that of others. Her experiences will play out in the presence of people who don't share her perspective. And where she feels a new sense of power in being chosen for the quest, but also a new weakness, bowing underneath the weight of responsibility that sits on her shoulders.
Wait.
In Saga, we have once again utilized binaural audio to bring Senua''s voices to life. Her furies still travel with her, but their tone has changed this time. She continues to be haunted by her father, and she starts to feel the audible presence of Icelandic myth infecting her mind.
That scream.
That voice.
Something dark, Senua.
You need to go up there.
Don't let them see you coming.
You need to find out.
Don't let the monsters find you.
You can do this, Senua.
To hear the world as Senua does, we spend time with people with lived experiences of psychosis, and also with Paul Fletcher. This made a strong basis of what it is to hear voices, what they say, how they sound, how they change or react to external stimulus, and this paired with all we learned from the first game, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, led us to create Senua's own sonic version of reality. To me, it's a privilege to sit in a room to play our game, and as we progress, hear their comments, thoughts and suggestions. Each one provides a different perspective, and I find especially inspiring and humbling to hear from Eddie his own experiences. Especially, I find he has a way of putting very complex emotions, situations in a very simple yet poetic way, and it's really inspiring for me when I'm thinking in Senua''s journey. We use binaural audio to bring 3D space in the headphones. This allows to experience the voice hearing and other sounds with a physical sense. Also extremely important is the performance of the voices, and for that we have been collaborating with Helen and Abby, our Furies. They are the most prominent voices of Senua. The way we perform is important as well, allowing for freedom, movement, creative input from Helen and Abby, and also important to have with them conversation and spend time talking about the journey of our character. There is a lot of time gone into experimentation, so every sound in the game is connected in some way with the emotion that Senua is experiencing as she travels through Iceland, from the sounds of the nature to some of the musical moments.
What's a sign?
Beyond of its uniqueness or not, I find that for me, something extremely important is to create a connection beyond the game. So in understanding Senua''s own reality and going on a journey with her, I hope our players will understand better how people experience reality different, and in doing so, I feel, we break those walls that keep us distant and lonely.
My brothers used to come here to practice fighting. Sneak out. Follow them.
For Saga, in order to bring Senua''s experiences of hallucinations to life, it was very important for us to listen to people's real lived experiences. It was then a case of thinking about how Senua''s world and reality might look when faced with these types of examples. This would have been impossible without Paul Fletcher and amazing people like Eddie and Kathy, who've been so open and honest about what they have been and do go through on a day-to-day basis. I think it takes real strength to be able to talk about such personal things to a new group of people. On the visual side, we have lent into things like repeating fractal geometry shapes, cymatic patterns, with lighting and post-processing changes to all help reflect the current feelings of Senua. And hopefully, when combined with the audio and gameplay, the player will get a sense of what we are aiming to achieve.
Dying right before your eyes. just like before.
No, this cannot happen again.
You couldn't do anything.
We have to stop it happening. Face it.
You need to face it.
Focus.
You need to look at it.
In Sacrifice, we saw a story of Senua''s suffering at the hands of her experiences. In Saga, we're telling a more nuanced story of the next step on her journey. One where she has found a greater balance, but where her experiences are just as strong. Where rather than being a victim to her experiences of psychosis, she is driven by them on a path that only she sees.
Bringing sin with you. The gods cannot be killed.
One thing that I find very exciting in Saga is that there's an attempt to explore something that is really neglected in my field, which is the experience of a dual reality that some people have. People who have had Senua''s types of experience have spoken to me about this feeling that they have their own reality, but they also recognize the reality that others experience, and it can be very confusing, it can be disorientating. And it's exciting to me that the game contains an explicit attempt to portray this experience of dual realities, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how people respond to that.
It's amazing what has been done and what's been portrayed. I think it's really difficult to turn words into what other people might be seeing, but I think I'm always blown away by what Ninja Theory come up with for their games, and I'm really stunned at the quality of, you know, the things that she sees and the sounds of the voices that she has. I think they're pretty realistic.
She's getting closer.
Yes, she can feel it.
I hope that the game will help people who maybe don't understand psychosis or don't know very much about it to start with. I think by experiencing some of what they will do in the game, I think it brings to life a little bit of what it's like to have psychosis, and I think hopefully people will learn from it.
Now I'm working as a peer support worker, and what that means is that I, in my case, in the job that I have in my role, it means that I go to see my people, to see my peers. We talk about how things have been. The way that Hellblade has captured the experience of psychosis is nothing like I've ever seen before in terms of its realism, in terms of its fairness to people like me.
Do not forget my stories, Senua. I am with you still. Out of hell you have come, and now find yourself in Midgard, the world of men. Do not think it any less dangerous for that. Your path has taken you far from home, across the boundless sea, and you must go on to the heart of this place. To the heart of man. You have seen how the Northmen journey out to conquer, and this is one of their lands, as icy dark as Niflheim, yet as fiery as Muspel. It has not long been claimed, and they try still to tame it. The Skald's verse speaks of a man called Grettir the Strong. A strange and bloody life he led. And it happened in this land you have come to. Listen to his story, Senua, for it may in some small way illuminate your own. The Skalds say that in Grettir's time, a nearby farm was plagued by hauntings. a shepherd called Glamour was killed by some evil force, found dead in the snow, bloated and black. His body could not be taken to burial because he was held fast to the ground. So it was left. 3 days after his death, the body was missing. The Skalds tell how the revenant Glamour roamed the settlements, terrifying all those who lived there. Each one he killed, in turn, rose to walk beside him. Thus, evil begets evil. But the man 𝒂𝒑𝒅 was proud and overbearing, and thought the Droigar no match for his strength. The Skalds say that 𝒂𝒑𝒅 fought and killed the Droigar Glamour, but not before Glamour had cursed him. His strength would be turned against him, his deeds bring death and exile, and he would be always before 𝒂𝒑𝒅's eyes, making him afraid to be alone. He saw all sorts of phantoms wherever he looked, and thus people who see things that aren't there are said to have Glamour's eyes. The Skalds tell how in the time of 𝒂𝒑𝒅's kinsman Thorgrim, there was a terrible famine. No crops could be grown, and the fish fled the nets. It lasted years, and the people were desperate. There was no respite even in spring, since terrible gales from the north would rise up and set in for weeks. This is a cold and unforgiving land, Senua. In the time of famine, at the place known as 𝒆𝒏𝒄𝒅, Thorgrim found a huge finback whale, beached and dead. His neighbor, Thorfinn, had already found it and was in the process of flensing it. But Thorgrim claimed it as his own. Thorfinn said he would not give it up without a fight. If that's what you want, Thorgrim said, let it be so. And he launched a blow at Thorfinn, cutting off his head in one strike. The Skalds say that the neighbors fought, armed only with the knives and axes they had brought to cut up the whale, even picking out the whale ribs to beat down their enemies. Thorgrim's men had loaded their boats with whale meat, but as they went to leave, one of their opponents struck Thorgrim's brother a fatal blow. And this is how hunger fates desperate men to come to blows, striking out against one another to survive. The Skalds speak of the time 𝒂𝒑𝒅, traveling with some others, ran into rough weather and docked their boat on an island. They had not brought fire with them, and the merchants complained bitterly. Seeing a great fire blazing on the other side of the strait, 𝒂𝒑𝒅 said he would swim over to fetch it. He took off his clothes and struck out across the water, wearing nothing but a cloak. When 𝒂𝒑𝒅 came to the farm where the fire was burning, all was peaceful. By the time he reached them, his cloak was frozen stiff, and he looked like nothing more than some huge troll. The frightened farmhands struck out at him with the first things to hand, the burning logs from the fire. 𝒂𝒑𝒅 fought them off and got the fire he sought. But the sparks from the logs spread fire all over the house, and nobody survived the blaze. The Skalds say that 𝒂𝒑𝒅 swam back across the strait, keeping the fire safe from the water. His friends applauded 𝒂𝒑𝒅's bravery, but when word spread about the massacre at the farm, people took against 𝒂𝒑𝒅. Nobody wanted anything to do with him, and when the news reached the Althing in the summer, 𝒊𝒏𝒄 was pronounced an outlaw. All doors would hence be shut to him. The Skalds speak of how 𝒊𝒂𝒅, now an outlaw, took rest on the island of 𝒄𝒄𝒄𝒄 with a man called Audun. 𝒊𝒂𝒅 saw a great yellow glow like a fire rising from the ground. Audun told him it was coming from the burial mound of 𝒂𝒅 the Old, who ever since he died had haunted the island, and warned him to stay away. The Skalds say �𝒂𝒅 wanted the sword that was buried in 𝒂𝒅's howe, and would not be deterred from seeking it. He broke the mound open and started digging until he reached the timber props. By this time it was night. Audun warned him again not to continue, but �𝒂𝒅 threw down a rope and went inside the mound. No light penetrated it, and it reeked of death. But he persisted in exploring. �𝒂𝒅 found the sword he was seeking, 𝒂𝒅's loom, buried in the grave mound. He went to leave, but before he could reach the rope, something grabbed him from behind, and �𝒂𝒅 realized the mound dweller would not let his treasure go. The two fought ferociously until �𝒂𝒅 got the advantage and chopped off the revenant's head. But 𝒂𝒅's loom would prove his undoing, fated to be the sword that killed him. The Skald's verse tells how �𝒂𝒅 made many enemies with his proud and overbearing nature. Always quick to anger, his strength and fighting prowess meant that even the most trivial of quarrels met a fatal end. The kinsmen of those he killed or maimed were angry, and because he was an outlaw, no one was allowed to help him. The outlaw �𝒂𝒅 fled to the island of Drangi. His enemies knew he was there, but he was still so strong and fierce, nobody could shift him. Thorbjorn, first among his foe, sent his foster mother to see �𝒂𝒅. She was a 𝒆𝒍𝒍𝒂𝒅 and very wily. She enchanted a tree branch and sent it to wash up on Drangi. �𝒂𝒅 tried to cut it up for firewood, but his axe flew back and struck him in the leg. The wound blackened and festered, and �𝒂𝒅 feared his time was close. The Skalds say �𝒂𝒅, wounded by 𝒍𝒍𝒃, was now so weak it was possible for his enemies to defeat him. Under cover of night, Thorbjorn and his men attacked his shelter. They tried to disarm him, but he clung so firmly to his sword, 𝒂𝒅's loom, that they had to cut off his arm to get it free. Then they used his sword to cut off his head, and the land's mightiest outlaw was dead. As the Droigar glamour had predicted, all �𝒂𝒅's brave and fine deeds brought him misery. So fate makes prisoners of us all. But it was �𝒂𝒅's nature that made him fight the Droigar, and �𝒂𝒅's nature that led to blood feud and exile. So what is truly our prison, Senua? Is our path ordained, and we powerless to change it? Or do we blame uncertain powers for what we ourselves ordain?
In all the places of the earth, they know that the gods and spirits affect man's path. All the misfortune that befalls man lies at their feet. If you have eyes to see, you see their presence and their power. Keep your eyes open, traveler, and you might see their faces. Here, they once said that Loki lies imprisoned in a cave, trapped by his enemies, who set a serpent above to drip venom on his face. His wife, Sigyn, sits beside to catch the venom in a bowl, but when she must leave to empty it, the poison falls unabated. His pain is so great that he thrashes and writhes. And here above, we see the earth shake and break apart. Across the sea, they know that the earth is carried in the arms of a giant. When he is vexed or injured, he may not carry his burden so gently, and the world will feel his anger and pain. In a land far away, they say the winds are trapped inside the earth. They try always to make their escape, and they buffet and beat on the walls of their prison, causing the earth to quiver. And when they break through, they make their escape. They explode out in fury. In the lands of your birth, people live hidden too, in the hills and stones. They may be the remnants of a godly race, who lost a war with giants and, finding the world changed, retreated into silence. But you still see their carvings and circles from the time when they walked among men. Here, they know that if times are harsh, you may ask of the hidden folk to share their bounty. And if you are strong and wise and good, they may hear your plea and send you aid. But if you are not, or if you do not respect the strictures they lay down, you might have your strife doubled. In the lands of your birth, and in these lands too, they know that people can be taken by the secret fair ones. If you are not careful and do not keep to the pathways, you may find yourself among them. In a land to the east, they know that when a traveler finds themselves lost, it is the fault of the 𝒂𝒂𝒂, who wait at the crossroads to trick souls passing by. The only remedy is to let your horse lead you home, because beasts have no souls. But if you have no horse, your soul is lost forever. In this place, they know that sometimes the hidden folk will take their children and leave another in their place. These children may look the same as their own, but will be dazed and far away, or ill-tempered. And you know then you have a changeling in your house. In this land, when people cannot raise their children, they will leave them in a sacred place for the hidden folk to take and care for. Sometimes these children come back, but it is said that they are changed, with a wildness in their eyes, and their parents do not want them. These people know that children who have died uncared for can return as 𝒂𝒂𝒅𝒂, small ghosts clad in fluttering rags. When there are storms, they may cry as they did when they were human, and will look for their mothers until they find them, and never leave them again. In this land, you catch sight of the Landdisir, the spirits who embody the sacred places, the rivers and rocks. Do you see the Lady of the Mountain, the 𝒂𝒂𝒂, who bathes in the waterfall and lets the drops fall on her shoulder? In the heart of the Northlands, they know the storms are born of the 𝒂𝒂𝒅𝒂, the hunt of Odin. The huntsmen ride horses with eyes of fire. Their weapons clash like thunder, and it is best to hide inside, lest your spirit be called to join them. In your lands, traveller, they know that the 𝒂𝒉, the hag of winter, is the one who hurls sleet and snow upon the land. She lives in a sea rock and rules the waves of the roiling winter ocean with her blackthorn staff. She strikes the ground to destroy the shoots of growing green, so the winter will lie long and low on the land. These people know that the sea god, Ran, sets out nets to trap sailors and drag them to her world. She sends the waves, her daughters, to wreck boats so she will have more men to take. And jealously, she pulls them down beneath the water. People here speak of warriors who can transform themselves into bears when they are enraged. Their skin becomes hide so thick no sword or spear can break it. When King Hrólfr fought Skald, many people saw a great bear fighting beside him, who killed more men with its paw than any 5 soldiers. Men here will tell of how Jarl Hakon worshipped the giant Thorgerða and sought her aid in the middle of battle when the tide was turning against him. Fleeing to an island, he pleaded with her for aid. She demanded a sacrifice. She rejected all of his offerings until he, at last, killed his own son in sacrifice. Thorgerða gave aid, and Hakon's enemies saw the giants striding amongst the ships, arrows flying from every finger and never missing their mark. Their morale was sapped, and Hakon won his battle.